Chukat, Statute, God's trumpet called presence. Sixth reading from the book of Numbers, 39th reading from Torah. Outline of Torah portion. Ceremony of the Red Heifer. Numbers chapter 19 verse 1 to verse 19. The Torah portion begins with the statute, decree of the Torah concerning Red Heifer ceremony for purification after contact with human death. The Hebrew word Chukat or chalk used in verse 2 is translated as decree. According to Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, in his book, Horeb divides the commandments into 6 categories. Mitzvot, commandments, commandments of love. Mishpatim, judgments, declarations of justice towards human beings. Chukim, statutes, laws of righteousness of justice towards human beings. The Chukim are also often described as commandments that do not seem to have a rational basis. Based on human logic alone, no legislature should have enacted such laws. Torah, instructions, fundamental principles relating to mental and spiritual preparation for life. Edot, symbolic observations, symbolic observances representing truths which form the basis of Israel's life. Avodah, worship, divine service. Included in the Chukim are diverse mitzvot such as respect for animals, cows and its offspring not slaughtering on the same day, respect for human corpse, prohibition of suicide, clothing, sexual immorality, food that can and cannot be eaten. Provision for purification, verse 1 to 2. The Lord spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, to speak to the children of Israel, and that they bring him a red heifer without blemish or without defect, and on which a yoke has never come. The sacrifice, burning and gathering of ashes of the red heifer, verse 3 to 10. It was slaughtered outside all 3 camps by a non-Kohen while Eleazar watched. Eleazar to take from its blood with his finger and sprinkle it towards the tent of meeting 7 times. The cow shall then be burned in his presence. The Kohen shall take a piece of cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson wool, and cast them into the burning of the cow. This is a different kind of offering. It was a sacrifice, but unique in many ways. The animal must be of specific color, a female cow. Offering was slaughtered, not sacrificed. Animal was killed outside the camp, not at the altar. Burned whole, not cut into pieces. Blood was not drained from the animal. Blood was not applied to the altar, but sprinkled towards the tabernacle. The ashes of the burnt red cow, cedar, hyssop, and scarlet fabric are gathered and safely stored. The ashes are then mixed with water and used for sprinkling on an impure person. Touching a dead human body, verse 11 to 13. A person who encounters a human corpse is impure for 7 days. He becomes pure by having the ashes of the red cow mixed with water and then sprinkled on him on the 3rd and 7th days. Application of the cleansing water made with the ashes of red heifer. Numbers chapter 19 verse 18 to chapter 20 verse 6. Application of the cleansing water, verse 18 and 19. The ashes of the red heifer was sprinkled in fresh running water. Special care was exercised to take only living water. That is, water from a flowing stream was used for this purpose. Ashes of the red heifer dissolved in living water brought ceremonial cleansing. even uncleanness brought about by death. A ritually clean person shall take the hyssop and dip it into the water, and he is to sprinkle it on the tent, on all the vessels, and on the people who were in it. Anyone who touched the bone, the slain person, the corpse, or the grave. A ritually clean person shall sprinkle on the unclean person who needs cleansing on the 3rd and 7th day. He is to wash his clothes and bathe in water. He shall be ritually clean in the evening. This consummates his cleansing. Nature of uncleanness, verse 20 to 22. If an unclean person does not cleanse himself, that person shall be cut off from the congregation, for he has defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. Unless the water of the purification is sprinkled upon him, he remains unclean. This is to be a perpetual statute. One who sprinkles the water of purification shall wash his clothes, and the one who touches the water of purification shall be unclean until evening. Whatever the unclean one touches shall become unclean, and anyone who touches him shall be unclean until evening. The last year, chapter 20, verse 1. Chapter 20 begins with the account of year 40, the last year of wandering in the wilderness. The entire congregation of the children of Israel arrived at the desert of Sin in the first month, and they settled in Kadesh. Miriam died and was buried there. She too died through a kiss from God's mouth. Israel contends with Moshe and Aaron for lack of water. Verse 2 to 6, chapter 20. Suddenly the congregation and the livestock had no water. And we learn here is that all 40 years they had the well in Miriam's merit. As a result, they assembled against Moshe and Aaron. People quarreled with them. They complained as to why the assembly of the Lord and their livestock brought to the wilderness to die there. They complained of not having grain, figs, wines, or pomegranates. Their grumbling and murmuring limited their vision. They failed to see the wilderness as the place of God's faithful and miraculous provision. Moshe and Aaron left the assembly, moved away from the people, and went to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces, and the glory of Adonai appeared on them. God commands Moshe to provide water for Israel. Numbers chapter 20, verse 7 to verse 13. The Lord spoke to Moshe and told him to speak to the rock to yield its water. Verse 7 and 8. The Lord commanded Moshe to take his rod, he and Aaron, to gather the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. And water will be provided for the congregation and the animals. Specifically, God's instruction was to take the rod, but not to use it. God's promise was that the rock will yield its water for the congregation and for the animals when Moshe speaks to it. Moshe's contention, verse 9 to 11. So Moshe took the rod and gathered the people. Instead of speaking to the rock, he addressed the people. He called them rebels and asked them, "Must we bring water for you out of this rock?" On many occasions, children of Israel contended against Moshe, and his reaction was different. At Kadesh, Numbers chapter 16, verse 4, at Mara, Exodus chapter 15, verse 22 to 25, and at Massa and Meribah, Exodus chapter 17, verse 1 to 7. Moshe was not contempt or bitter as seen on this occasion. Here Moshe strikes the rock not only once but twice. Psalms 6, verse 32 to 33 describes the situation. There they angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moshe and on account of them, because they rebelled against his spirit, so that he spoke harshly. with his lips. God rebuked Moshe, verse 12 and 13. The Lord spoke to Moshe and Aaron and told them that they failed to believe in him, that they did not have faith in him to sanctify him in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore Moshe shall not bring this assembly to the land which I have given them. Moshe sent a message to the king of Edom, Numbers chapter 20, verse 14 to 21. Moshe sends a message to the king of Edom, verse 14 to 17. Messengers were sent from Kadesh to the king of Edom. He briefly explains the history of the Jewish people and requested for permission to pass through Edom. Israel is now at the final stage of their Exodus journey. They are ready to go to Canaan from Kadesh through Edom. Their first stage of Exodus journey was from Egypt to Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 12, verse 31 to chapter 18, verse 27. Second stage was the sojourn at Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 19, verse 1 to Numbers chapter 10:10. Third stage was the first approach to the promised land, but failing to enter the land by faith and aborted, Numbers chapter 10, verse 11 to 14 to 45. Fourth stage was the 30 years of wandering in the wilderness until generation of unbelief had died. Numbers chapter 15, verse 1 to chapter 20, verse 13. Fifth stage, second and final approach to the promised land. Numbers chapter 20, verse 14 to Joshua chapter 2, 24. Moshe addressed his message to king of Edom, saying, "Thus says your brother Israel," because nation of Israel was a brother nation to Edom because of Jacob. Jacob and Esau were brothers. In his correspondence to the king of Edom, Moshe briefly remarked about Israel's time in Egypt and their deliverance, the angel of the Lord accompanying them, and God's faithfulness towards Israel. Moshe requested permission to pass through the land of Edom, promising not to pass through fields or vineyards, not to drink water from their wells, that they will go along King's Highway until they have passed through their territory, which was the trade route linking Damascus, Egypt, Arabia, and lands in between. The Edomites refused request of Israel. Verse 18 to 21. Edomites refused request of Israel to pass through their land. Moshe then offered to ensure that they would stay on the road and pay for any water they drank. Edom refused again. Edom came out against Israel with many men and with a strong hand. So Israel turned away. Their refusal to grant passage through Edom made Israel's journey more dangerous and discouraging. But Israel did not fight Edom. Rather, they went around them. Kadesh to Mount Hor, Numbers chapter 20, verse 22 to 21 to verse 9. Preparation for Aaron's death, verse 22 to 29. The children of Israel, the entire congregation, journeyed from Kadesh and came to Mount Hor. The Lord spoke to Moshe and Aaron in Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, and told that Aaron shall be gathered to his people, and he shall not enter the promised land, because he rebelled against God's word at the waters of Meribah. God instructed Moshe to take Aaron and Eleazar, his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor. Aaron's garments were stripped and was put on Eleazar, his son. Aaron died on the top of the mountain. Moshe and Eleazar came down from the mountain. When the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, the entire house of Israel mourned for Aaron for 30 days. According to the Jewish tradition, Aaron died on the first of the 40th year in the wilderness. Defeat of the king of Arad the Canaanite. Chapter 21, verse 1 to 3. The king of Arad, the Canaanite, dwelt in the south. He heard that Israel was coming. He fought against Israel and took some of them as prisoners. Israel vowed to God that they would devote the cities of Arad to God by destroying them completely. God then granted them victory. The name of the place was called Homa. It was at Homa that Israelites were defeated when they tried to enter the promised land by force. God brought them back to the same place and gave them victory. Israel became discouraged. Verse 4 and 5. Israel journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. People became very discouraged on the way. Again they grumbled for lack of food and water. They called God's provision of manna worthless bread. The Lord sends fiery serpents. Verse 6. The Lord sends fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many died. Moshe prayed for the people. Verse 7 to 9. People repented for their sin. They said, "We have sinned against God and you," and asked Moshe to take the serpents away. God instructed Moshe to make a serpent out of copper and place it on a pole. Whoever was bitten and looked at the copper serpent would be healed. On the way to the promised land, Numbers chapter 21, verse 10 to verse 20. Journey towards Moab. Verse 10 to 20. The children of Israel moved on and camped at Oboth. From Oboth, they moved on and camped at Abarim in the wilderness east of Moab towards the sunrise. From there, they moved on and camped in the valley of Zered. From there, they moved on to the other side of Arnon, the wilderness that extends from the border of the Amorites. Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Besides the names of the places Israel passes through on their journey towards the promised land, cryptic songs from a book called The Wars of the Lord are recorded in Torah. These songs express the elation of the children of Israel experienced on their journey towards the promised land. Once again, Israel was trusting God for his provision. Israel burst into joyful song of deliverance way back at the Red Sea. Exodus chapter 15. That was a long time ago, about 40 years. Once again, they sang joyful songs. Defeat of Sihon, king of Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. Numbers chapter 21, verse 21 to chapter 22, verse 1. Message to Amorite, king of Sihon, verse 21 to 32. Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, and asked to pass through their land, saying that they will not turn aside into fields or vineyards and will not drink water from their wells. They promised to take the king's highway until they have passed through his territory. But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. He gathered all his people, came against Israel in the wilderness, and at Jahaz they fought against Israel. Edomites threatened Israel but did not attack. But Amorites attacked Israel. According to Midrash, Sihon was one of the Nephilim who has survived the great flood of Noah's time. God's favor was with Israel, and they defeated him and took possession of his land. This became the first land Israel possessed in coming out of Egypt. For the first time, they dwelled in conquered cities of the Amorites. This land was allotted to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the tribe of Manasseh. Numbers chapter 32. Defeat of King Og, verse 33 to 35. Israel went up by the way to Bashan. So Og, king of Bashan, went out against Israel at Edrei. But God told Moshe not to fear him, for I have delivered him into your hands, with all his people and his land, and to do to him as they did to Sihon, king of the Amorites. So Israel defeated them until there was no survivor left, and they took possession of the land.